spent our college funds on casino hotels and forced us to show receipts or sleep in the garage, then laughed and said, "You all should thank me for teaching you discipline." When I finally confronted him with the proof, he snapped, "No one will believe a broke little brat like you." I just stared at him. That was a year ago. Yesterday, the judge read the guilty verdict while he stood there pale and silent. In my house, every penny we spent had to be reported by 9 p.m. sharp. If you went even 1 cent over your weekly $20 budget, you slept in the garage. My 12-year-old sister spent 3 nights out there in January because she bought the $1.50 notebook instead of the 49-cent one for school. When she came back inside, her fingers were blue and she couldn't stop shaking. But she apologized to my father for being wasteful. I was 16 at the time, and I thought that's just how families managed money. So by the time I turned 17, I'd seen my cousin get hospitalized for hypothermia after a week in the garage, my aunt sneaking food to their kids, and my uncle teaching his son to forge receipts. We all had to submit every receipt, every bank statement, every proof of purchase to our parents daily. The rules were simple: stay under budget or sleep outside. No exceptions, no excuses. But then I noticed something that changed everything. My older brother never slept in the garage, ever. One day I saw him buying $60 worth of video games, and I waited for the punishment that never came. That's when I discovered my parents gave him triple our budget but told him to keep it secret. I was taking economics that semester, and for a project on modern finance, I researched cash-back apps and rewards programs. That's when I learned about receipt scanning apps that gave you money back, stores that gave cash for returns without receipts, and manufacturer rebates my parents didn't track. I started small, buying items, scanning the receipts for cashback, then returning them for full refunds. Within a month, I had an extra $40 saved up, but I couldn't keep this to myself. Not after my cousin ended up in the ICU with severe hypothermia and permanent lung damage from her week in the garage during a snowstorm. Not when my sister was developing chronic bronchitis from repeated nights outside. So I started a financial literacy club. Every Sunday at my grandmother's house, while the adults talked in the living room, I taught my cousins and siblings the tricks I'd learned. I showed them how to split receipts so one person could buy for many. I taught them basic photo editing to adjust receipt amounts. We created legitimate-looking purchase histories that hid our real spending. Most importantly, I showed them how to document the medical issues from garage punishments without our parents knowing. We got sophisticated about it. We had spreadsheets tracking who needed what, emergency funds hidden for those facing garage nights, and even a system for sharing warm clothes and blankets. Some kids learned to manipulate their spending records by $20 or $30, buying actual food while their parents praised their frugality. Then I discovered why my father was so obsessed with our spending. I found betting slips in his car, casino receipts, online gambling transactions. He'd lost thousands while forcing us to account for every penny. The man who made my sister sleep outside for $1 had blown our college funds at poker tables. Everything started falling apart when my father lost his job because of his gambling debts. He became paranoid, announcing new policies including surprise receipt audits and bank statement cross-checks. That's when my mother found our emergency fund during spring cleaning. $500 in small bills hidden in my closet. My parents dragged me to the kitchen and demanded I tell them where it came from. When I stayed silent, my father grabbed my sister, the one with bronchitis, and said she'd sleep in the garage until I confessed everything. I had 2 hours to decide. While I sat there trying to figure out how to protect everyone, my cousin, who'd been hospitalized, started recording my father on her phone. She got him admitting he knew the garage caused her lung damage, but that it taught good financial discipline. When the 2 hours were up, I told my parents I'd call everyone over to apologize and explain. They smirked, thinking they'd won. But when the family gathered, I didn't confess about the cashback schemes. Instead, I pulled out the gambling receipts, the casino photos, the betting account statements. I showed everyone how he'd spent $50,000 of family money while his children froze in garages. My cousin hit play on her recording. My mother heard my father casually discussing permanent lung damage like it was nothing. Then she found credit card statements showing charges at hotels when he was supposedly working late. The mistress he'd been funding with our grocery money. Everyone's eyes were opening, and just when they thought it couldn't get worse, it did. My brother Marcus had been standing in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. He stepped forward and grabbed the receipts from my hands, crumpling them up. My father lunged for the papers, but Marcus held them high above his head. The room erupted into chaos as my cousins started pulling out their phones, documenting everything. My Aunt Catherine, who'd been silent for years about her children sleeping in the garage, finally spoke up. She revealed how she'd been secretly working 2 jobs to pay for her kids' medical bills from the cold exposure. My father tried to leave the room, but my Uncle Sebastian blocked the doorway. The confrontation escalated when my grandmother, who we thought was too frail to understand our situation, produced a folder from her purse. Inside were copies of every medical record, every hospital bill, every prescription for pneumonia and bronchitis that resulted from the garage punishments. She'd been collecting evidence for 2 years. The room fell silent as she spread the documents across the kitchen table. 43 separate medical incidents, thousands of dollars in treatments, all because children went a few dollars over budget. My mother picked up each paper with shaking hands, reading the diagnoses: chronic respiratory infections, frostbite, hypothermia, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress. My father tried to justify it, claiming it built character and financial responsibility, but my cousin Kathy, still recovering from her lung damage, stood up and lifted her shirt to show the surgical scars from her collapsed lung. The garage punishment had nearly killed her. My father's face went pale, but he still wouldn't admit fault. That's when I revealed the second folder I'd been hiding. Bank statements showing how he'd been stealing from our college funds to cover his gambling losses, forged signatures on withdrawal slips, fake investment reports he'd created to hide the missing money. $23,000 meant for my education, gone. $15,000 from my sister's fund, vanished. Even my brother's fund, despite being the favorite, had been raided. My mother sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the betrayal. She asked how long I'd known, and I admitted I'd discovered it 3 months ago while researching for my economics project. I'd been documenting everything, creating a paper trail that couldn't be disputed. Every bet, every loss, every lie was recorded. My cousins began sharing their own discoveries. Sebastian had found evidence that my father had been using our social security numbers to open credit cards. Kat had screenshots of him selling our belongings online to fund his gambling. Even my younger cousins had noticed things missing from their rooms, items that mysteriously disappeared when my father needed quick cash. The extended family members who'd gathered started connecting dots. The reason for the extreme budget rules became clear. It wasn't about teaching financial responsibility. It was about controlling every penny so he could fuel his addiction while maintaining the image of a responsible father. The garage punishments weren't discipline. They were intimidation tactics to keep us from questioning where the money really went. My grandmother took charge of the situation. She announced that she was opening her home to any child who needed shelter, no questions asked. She'd already consulted with a lawyer about custody arrangements if necessary. The garage punishments would end immediately, or she would take action to protect every child in the family. My father tried to storm out, but my mother blocked his path. She demanded his car keys, wallet, and credit cards. When he refused, she pulled out her phone and showed him the photos she'd taken of his car at the casino last week when he'd claimed to be at a work conference. She had her own evidence file, and she was done enabling him. The family meeting turned into an intervention. Each person shared how the financial abuse had affected them. My aunt described watching her daughter struggle to breathe after nights in the garage. My uncle talked about teaching his son to lie and forge documents just to avoid punishment. Even my brother, who'd been favored, admitted the guilt he carried knowing his siblings suffered while he was protected. My sister, despite her young age, showed more courage than any of us. She pulled out a journal where she'd been documenting every garage night, every wheeze, every time she couldn't sleep because she couldn't breathe properly. The entries were heartbreaking. Descriptions of watching her breath fog in the freezing garage, counting the hours until morning, wondering if she'd survive until sunrise. As the evidence mounted, my father's defenses crumbled. He tried shifting blame, claiming we were ungrateful, that he'd provided for us, that his gambling was under control, but the receipts didn't lie. The medical records didn't lie. The credit reports showing maxed out cards in our names didn't lie. My mother made a decision that would change everything. She announced that she was taking control of all family finances immediately. Every account, every card, every asset would be frozen until a full audit could be completed. She'd already spoken to a financial advisor who specialized in gambling addiction recovery. This father's cruelty cuts so deep, like making children sleep in freezing garages over pennies while he gambles away their futures. WTF is wrong with this guy. The house would be refinanced to pay off the secret debts, and strict controls would be implemented. But that wasn't enough for the younger kids who'd suffered. My cousin demanded to know what would happen to ensure this never occurred again. Would my father face any real consequences, or would this be swept under the rug like so many family secrets? The room waited for an answer. My grandmother stood up from her chair and walked to the center of the room. She pulled out her phone and began making calls to family members who weren't present. Within minutes, she had arranged for my younger cousins to stay at various relatives' homes that night. My father watched helplessly as his control system crumbled before his eyes. The next morning, my mother woke me early and handed me a stack of bank documents. She needed my help cataloging every transaction from the past 5 years. We spent hours at the kitchen table, highlighting suspicious withdrawals and tracking patterns. My economics knowledge proved invaluable as I explained how my father had been moving money between accounts to hide his gambling losses. My sister came downstairs carrying a box of receipts she'd been secretly collecting. Inside were duplicates of every purchase she'd made, annotated with notes about which ones had resulted in garage punishments. The meticulous record-keeping revealed that my father's punishment threshold had been getting stricter as his gambling debts increased. That afternoon, my Aunt Catherine arrived with her own documentation. She'd been photographing her children's medical conditions after each garage punishment, creating a visual timeline of deteriorating health. The images showed progression from minor cold symptoms to severe respiratory distress requiring emergency intervention. My father returned home from wherever he'd spent the night and found the locks changed. My mother had acted swiftly, securing the house while he was gone. He pounded on the door, but she simply held up the eviction notice she'd had prepared. The look of shock on his face was visible through the window. My cousins began arriving throughout the day, each bringing evidence they'd been hiding. Sebastian had bank statements showing unauthorized credit inquiries using his social security number. His younger brother had receipts for items that had disappeared from his room and later appeared on online auction sites. The pattern of theft was undeniable. My brother Marcus finally broke his silence about his preferential treatment. He revealed that our father had been grooming him to help manage the family finances, teaching him how to doctor spreadsheets and hide transactions. The guilt had been eating at him for years. Knowing his silence enabled our suffering. We established a temporary command center in the dining room, organizing evidence into categories: medical documentation, financial fraud, theft, and psychological abuse. My grandmother supervised the process, ensuring every piece of evidence was properly documented and copied. She'd hired a forensic accountant to review everything. The forensic accountant arrived that evening and immediately identified multiple instances of tax fraud. My father had been claiming fake business expenses to offset his gambling losses, using our names as employees of a non-existent company. The implications were staggering, potentially affecting our future ability to get student loans or jobs requiring background checks. My mother discovered that my father had been intercepting our mail, hiding credit card statements and collection notices. She found a hidden stash in the garage ceiling, ironically in the same space where we'd been forced to sleep. The stack of unopened envelopes revealed debts totaling over $80,000. My younger cousins, emboldened by the adults taking action, began sharing stories we'd never heard. They described my father threatening them if they ever told their parents about the garage punishments when they visited. He'd created a culture of fear that extended beyond our immediate family. The next few days became a blur of discoveries and revelations. My uncle Sebastian found evidence that my father had been siphoning money from our grandmother's accounts, taking advantage of her trust when she asked him to help with her banking. The betrayal cut deep, as she'd been living on a fixed income while unknowingly funding his addiction. My economics teacher, noticing my exhaustion in class, pulled me aside to check if everything was okay. I gave her a vague explanation about family troubles, but she sensed there was more. She offered to write a letter documenting my strong academic performance despite the challenges at home, something something that might help with college applications given our destroyed college funds. Back at home, we discovered my father had been maintaining multiple gambling accounts under variations of our names. He'd memorized our social security numbers and used them liberally, creating a web of debt that would take years to untangle. My mother spent hours on the phone with credit agencies, placing fraud alerts on all our accounts. My sister's health took a turn for the worse, requiring a trip to the emergency room when her breathing became labored. The doctor, reviewing her history, expressed concern about the pattern of respiratory issues in someone so young. My mother finally told him the truth about the garage punishments, and his expression turned grave. The doctor ordered comprehensive testing and discovered scarring in my sister's lungs consistent with repeated exposure to extreme cold. He documented everything carefully, noting that this constituted medical neglect. His report would become crucial evidence in the custody evaluation my grandmother had initiated. My father, locked out of the house, began showing up at our schools. He waited outside, trying to intercept us before we could get to our rides home. The security guard at my sister's middle school had to escort him off the property when he became aggressive. Each incident was documented and added to our growing file. My cousins reported similar encounters at their schools. My father had been approaching them, alternating between threats and bribes to get them to recant their statements about the garage punishments. One of my younger cousins recorded him offering her $100 to say she'd lied about sleeping outside. The financial investigation deepened when we discovered my father had been running a side business using our garage as a storage facility. He'd been buying and reselling electronics, keeping the profits off the books while forcing us to account for every penny of our allowances. The hypocrisy was staggering. My mother found business cards in his abandoned home office, revealing he'd been presenting himself as a financial advisor to other families in our community. The thought of him giving financial guidance while destroying our family's finances was both ironic and terrifying. We wondered how many other families he might have been deceiving. Our grandmother organized a meeting with all the affected children and a child psychologist. The session revealed the deep psychological impact of the financial abuse. My younger cousins exhibited signs of anxiety around money, some hoarding food in their rooms, afraid of being punished for eating too much. The psychologist documented everything, noting that the arbitrary and severe punishments had created lasting trauma. Several children showed symptoms of post-traumatic stress, including nightmares about freezing in the garage and panic attacks when handling money. Her report emphasized the long-term therapeutic needs of the family. My mother, overwhelmed by the revelations, struggled to process how she'd missed the signs for so long. She admitted that my father had been controlling their finances since they married, gradually isolating her from financial decisions. She'd trusted him completely, never questioning why she didn't have access to their accounts. We discovered my father had been maintaining a storage unit where he kept gambling memorabilia and evidence of his winnings, creating a shrine to his addiction. Among the items were photos of him at casinos with people we didn't recognize, suggesting he'd been living a complete double life. The storage unit also contained boxes of our personal belongings he'd claimed were lost or donated. Childhood toys, electronics, jewelry gifts from grandparents, all secretly sold or pawned when he needed quick cash. Each item represented a lie, a betrayal of trust that cut deeper than the financial losses. My Aunt Catherine revealed she'd been keeping her own secret. She'd installed a hidden camera in her garage after her daughter's hospitalization, hoping to document any future punishments. The footage she'd captured showed my father instructing her husband on how to make the garage punishment more effective by removing insulation from certain areas. The video evidence was damning, showing my father's calculated cruelty. He demonstrated how to position children away from heat sources and advised keeping the garage door cracked open just enough to let in cold air without being obvious to neighbors. His methodical approach revealed this wasn't misguided discipline, but deliberate torture. My school counselor, alerted by my economics teacher, called me in for a meeting. She'd noticed changes in my behavior and grades since the family crisis began. I found myself opening up about the situation, and she immediately began documenting everything from my school records, ensuring there would be context for any impact on my academic performance. The counselor connected us with resources for families dealing with financial abuse and gambling addiction. She explained that our situation, while extreme, wasn't unique. Many families struggled with similar issues, though few involved such systematic child abuse. Her validation helped us understand we weren't overreacting to seek help. The strength these kids show by keeping secret records and evidence all this time really moves me. Each child was quietly documenting their pain while suffering alone, and now they're finally being heard and believed. My cousins and I continued meeting secretly, now focused on supporting each other through the investigation process. We created a buddy system, ensuring no one faced my father alone if he attempted contact. The solidarity we'd built through our financial literacy club now served as our emotional support network. During one meeting, my cousin Kathy revealed she'd been experiencing severe anxiety attacks since the confrontation. The stress of reliving her garage experiences while providing testimony was taking its toll. We rallied around her, sharing our own struggles and reminding her that speaking up was breaking the cycle of abuse. My mother discovered my father had been using her name to secure loans from multiple payday lenders. The interest rates were astronomical, creating a debt spiral that would have eventually forced us to sell the house. She spent days visiting each lender, filing fraud reports and working to void the illegitimate loans. The payday lender visits revealed my father's desperation in his final months of control. He'd been borrowing from one to pay another, creating a shell game that was destined to collapse. The lenders, initially skeptical of my mother's fraud claims, became cooperative when shown the extensive documentation we'd compiled. My brother Marcus took on the role of protecting our younger siblings during this chaos. He drove them to and from school, ensuring my father couldn't intercept them. His transformation from complicit favorite to protective brother helped heal some of the resentment that had built up over years of preferential treatment. We learned that my father had been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, not for recovery, but to find new gambling partners. He'd been using the meetings to network with other addicts, organizing private games and exchanging tips on avoiding family detection. Even his attempts at help were corrupted by his addiction. The forensic accountant's final report was devastating. Beyond the direct theft and gambling losses, My father's actions had destroyed our credit ratings, compromised our identities, and created tax liabilities that would follow us for years. The total damage exceeded $200,000, not including medical costs from the garage punishments. My grandmother, reviewing the report, made a decision that would reshape our family. She announced she was creating a trust to protect any remaining family assets, with herself and my mother as co-trustees. No family member would have unilateral access to funds, preventing future financial abuse. The trust structure included provisions for our education and medical needs, funded by the sale of assets my father had hidden. My grandmother's foresight in documenting everything made it possible to trace and recover some of the stolen money, though the majority was gone forever. My sister's respiratory specialist recommended a long-term treatment plan that would cost thousands of dollars. The irony wasn't lost on us that money saved through garage punishments would now be spent on treating the damage they caused. My mother filed insurance claims, documenting the abuse as the cause of the medical conditions. The insurance company initially resisted covering treatment for abuse-related conditions, but our lawyer argued successfully that the systematic nature of the punishment constituted assault. The precedent this set would help other families in similar situations seek coverage for abuse-related medical treatment. My father's attempts to maintain control grew increasingly desperate. He began showing up at extended family gatherings, trying to turn relatives against us. His stories grew more elaborate with each telling, painting himself as a victim of ungrateful children and a vindictive wife. Most relatives saw through his lies, having witnessed the evidence we'd presented. But some, particularly those who'd benefited from his financial advice over the years, remained sympathetic. This divided our extended family, creating tensions that would persist long after the immediate crisis passed. The custody evaluation process was exhausting. Each child had to undergo interviews with court-appointed psychologists, reliving traumatic experiences while strangers took notes. My younger cousins struggled with the process, but we supported each other through each session. The evaluators' preliminary findings were unequivocal. My father posed a significant risk to child welfare and should have no unsupervised contact with minors. The recommendation included mandatory therapy and financial restitution before any consideration of restored parental rights. My mother, empowered by taking control of the finances, discovered hidden talents for money management. She implemented budgets that were firm but fair, teaching us financial responsibility without the cruel punishments. The contrast to my father's system was stark and healing. We established new family traditions around money, including monthly financial meetings where everyone could voice concerns and ask questions. Transparency replaced secrecy, and education replaced punishment. The younger children slowly began to lose their fear of financial discussions. My economics project, which had started this journey of discovery, earned recognition at the state level. My teacher encouraged me to expand it into a presentation on financial abuse and family economics. The irony of becoming an expert on family finances through surviving financial abuse wasn't lost on me. During my presentation, I carefully avoided personal details, but spoke passionately about the importance of financial literacy and recognizing abuse patterns. Several audience members approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of family financial dysfunction. Our experience, as painful as it was, could help others. My father's gambling addiction finally caught up with him legally when one of his creditors filed charges for check fraud. He'd been writing bad checks to cover gambling debts, hoping to win enough to cover them before they bounced. His arrest made the local news, bringing unwanted attention to our family situation. The media attention forced us to be more public about our story than we'd intended. My mother gave one carefully worded statement to the press, focusing on the importance of recognizing gambling addiction and protecting children from its effects. She refused all requests for follow-up interviews, prioritizing our privacy and healing. My cousin's parents, inspired by our family's action, began examining their own financial situations more carefully. Several discovered smaller-scale financial deceptions and control issues in their marriages. Our crisis had opened eyes throughout the extended family about the dangers of financial secrecy. The ripple effects continued as my Aunt Catherine decided to return to school to become a financial counselor. Her experience watching her children suffer due to financial abuse motivated her to help other families avoid similar situations. She often said our family's pain would serve a purpose if it prevented others' suffering. My younger sister, despite her health challenges, showed remarkable resilience. She began keeping a different kind of journal, documenting her recovery and the positive changes in our family. Her entries shifted from survival stories to hope for the future, marking our collective healing process. The financial recovery was slow and often frustrating. We learned to live on strict budgets by necessity rather than cruelty. Every family member contributed what they could, whether through part-time jobs or reducing expenses. The shared sacrifice brought us closer together than we'd ever been. My grandmother's health began declining under the stress of the family crisis. The woman who'd seemed frail but proved so strong in our time of need was paying a physical price for her emotional investment. We rallied around her, ensuring she received the care she needed while maintaining her dignity. Despite her health challenges, my grandmother remained the family matriarch, dispensing wisdom and keeping us united. She often reminded us that money could be replaced, but family couldn't, and that our bonds had been tested but not broken by my father's actions. As the months passed, we settled into new routines. School became a refuge where we could focus on something other than family drama. My grades, which had suffered during the worst of the crisis, began to recover. College, once seeming impossible due to depleted funds, became achievable through scholarships and financial aid. My brother Marcus surprised everyone by choosing a college major in social work. His experience as the favored child who'd watched his siblings suffer had profoundly affected him. He wanted to help other children trapped in abusive family situations, turning his guilt into purpose. The younger children in our family slowly began to trust again. Movie nights replaced garage nights. Family dinners became times of laughter rather than tension. The simple act of spending $1 without fear represented profound healing for kids who'd been terrorized over cents. My mother emerged from the crisis as a different person. The woman who'd been financially dependent and controlled for decades became a fierce advocate for financial transparency and independence. independence. She started volunteering with domestic abuse organizations, sharing her story to help other women recognize financial abuse. Our family's transformation attracted attention from researchers studying financial abuse and family dynamics. We participated in one study, hoping our experience could contribute to better understanding and prevention of similar situations. The clinical distance of academic study helped us process our trauma more objectively. As the one-year anniversary of the confrontation approached, we realized how far we'd come. The house that had been a place of fear and control had become a home again. The garage, once a symbol of punishment, had been converted into a game room where cousins gathered freely. The way they're all supporting their grandmother while she supports them creates this wonderful circle of care that makes my heart so full. These kids are teaching us all about real strength. My father, meanwhile, faced mounting legal troubles. Beyond the check fraud charges, investigations revealed tax evasion and identity theft charges. His gambling addiction had led him down a path of escalating criminal behavior that would likely result in significant jail time. We learned he'd been banned from multiple casinos for attempting to count cards and other schemes. His desperation to win had made him reckless, burning bridges throughout the gambling community. The man who'd controlled our every penny had lost control of his own life entirely. The extended family gradually healed from the divisions his manipulation had caused. Those who'd initially supported him came to understand the depth of his deception. Family gatherings, once tense affairs, became celebrations of our collective survival and recovery. My economics teacher invited me to speak to her new class about family financial management. I shared lessons learned from our experience, emphasizing the difference between healthy financial education and abusive control. The students listened intently, some recognizing patterns from their own families. The presentation led to discussions about creating a peer support group for students dealing with family financial stress. We established a club that met weekly, providing resources and emotional support for teenagers navigating complex family money issues. Our pain had sparked something positive for others. My sister's health continued to improve with treatment, though the lung scarring would be permanent. She approached her condition with remarkable maturity, using her experience to advocate for other children in abusive situations. Her testimony at family court hearings was particularly powerful, coming from someone so young. We discovered my father had been maintaining a journal of his own, documenting what he saw as financial wisdom and family management strategies. Reading his twisted justifications for the garage punishments provided insight into his distorted thinking. The journal became evidence in both criminal and custody proceedings. My mother filed for divorce, a process complicated by the financial chaos my father had created. Dividing assets when so many were hidden or gambled away proved challenging. The divorce attorney praised our extensive documentation, saying it was the most thorough evidence package she'd ever seen. The divorce proceedings revealed even more financial secrets. My father had been hiding assets in cryptocurrency accounts, thinking them untraceable. Our forensic accountant, however, tracked the digital trail, recovering some funds we thought were lost forever. Technology my father thought would hide his crimes ultimately exposed them. My cousins and I maintained our financial literacy club, now expanded to include emotional support and recovery resources. We created guides for recognizing financial abuse, protecting important documents, and building credit after identity theft. Our survival manual grew from shared trauma into genuine expertise. Local social services began referring families to our support group, recognizing the unique perspective we offered. We partnered with professional counselors to ensure we provided appropriate support while maintaining healthy boundaries. Our informal network evolved into a legitimate community resource. The approaching winter brought anxiety for those of us who'd suffered garage punishments. The first cold snap triggered panic attacks and flashbacks. We supported each other through these difficult moments, understanding that healing wasn't linear and that some scars would always remain. My grandmother's lawyer helped us navigate the complex process of identity recovery. Each family member needed new social security cards, credit monitoring, and official documentation of the identity theft. The bureaucratic maze was frustrating but necessary to reclaim our financial identities. We learned my father had joined online gambling communities where he portrayed himself as a successful player sharing strategies. His posts, full of bravado and false claims of big wins, contrasted sharply with the reality of his massive losses. Even in his downfall, he maintained delusions of grandeur. The criminal trial approached, and we prepared to testify about the financial abuse and its effects. The prosecutor warned us that my father's defense would try to minimize the garage punishments as normal parental discipline. We gathered medical records and expert testimony to counter this narrative. My mother discovered old family photos hidden in the attic, showing happier times before my father's gambling addiction took hold. The images were bittersweet, reminding us of the father we'd lost to addiction long before we'd lost him to consequences. We mourned the man he could have been. As we prepared for the trial, we reflected on our journey from victims to survivors. The financial literacy that began as a survival mechanism had become genuine expertise. The bonds forged in shared suffering had evolved into deep, supportive relationships. We'd transformed trauma into triumph, though the victory came at a tremendous cost. The prosecutor's office called that afternoon with news that my father had been offered a plea deal. He'd pled guilty to identity theft and check fraud in exchange for reduced sentencing. My mother slammed her fist on the kitchen counter when she heard the terms. 3 years probation and mandatory gambling addiction treatment seemed insufficient after everything he'd done. My sister's breathing treatments continued twice daily, the nebulizer becoming a permanent fixture on our kitchen table. The respiratory therapist taught us exercises to help strengthen her lungs, though she warned the scarring would limit her athletic activities permanently. My sister practiced the exercises religiously, determined to regain as much function as possible. Marcus drove me to the bank where we opened new accounts under fraud protection protocols. The bank manager walked us through enhanced security measures, explaining how to monitor for suspicious activity. We spent hours filling out paperwork to separate our identities from the web of accounts my father had created. My grandmother's health deteriorated rapidly. The stress of the family crisis had accelerated her decline, and she required round-the-clock care. We organized shifts among family members, ensuring someone was always with her. She remained lucid enough to oversee the trust arrangements, signing documents with a shaking hand. The forensic accountant discovered another hidden account containing $12,000 from my father's side business. My mother immediately filed to have it frozen pending the divorce settlement. The money would barely cover a fraction of the debts, but every dollar counted toward rebuilding. My economics teacher nominated me for a scholarship program for students who'd overcome adversity. The application required extensive documentation of our situation, which we had in abundance. I spent weeks crafting essays that explained our circumstances without dwelling on victimhood. Catherine's daughter, Kathy, underwent another surgery to address complications from her collapsed lung. The procedure went well, but recovery would take months. We organized meal deliveries and childcare for Catherine's other children while she stayed at the hospital. My father appeared at the house one evening, violating the restraining order my mother had obtained. He stood on the lawn, shouting about his rights as a father. My mother called the police while Marcus and I kept the younger children away from the windows. The officers arrested him, adding another charge to his growing list. The scholarship committee requested an interview, wanting to verify my story. I brought copies of medical records, bank statements, and the forensic accountant's report. The panel members exchanged concerned glances as they reviewed the evidence, clearly disturbed by the systematic nature of the abuse. My cousins organized a garage sale to raise money for Kathy's medical expenses. We sold everything we could spare, including items we'd recovered from my father's storage unit. Neighbors who'd heard about our situation donated additional items, turning it into a community event. The plea deal fell through when my father refused to admit guilt for the financial abuse charges. The prosecutor decided to proceed with a full trial, warning us it would mean testifying in open court. My mother gathered us together to discuss whether we were prepared for that ordeal. My sister's journal became evidence for the prosecution. Her detailed entries about garage nights, complete with timestamps and weather conditions, provided a devastating record of abuse. The prosecutor had a child advocacy expert review it to present the information sensitively in court. We discovered my father had been sending letters to extended family members, trying to turn them against us. Most relatives forwarded the letters to my mother, recognizing them as manipulation attempts. His desperation was evident in the increasingly incoherent accusations and conspiracy theories he spun. The divorce proceedings moved forward slowly. My father contested every asset division, claiming my mother had hidden money from him. The irony of his accusations wasn't lost on anyone familiar with the situation. The judge ordered a complete financial audit of both parties. My scholarship interview went better than expected. The committee members were particularly interested in how I'd used my economics knowledge to help other family members. They offered me a full ride to the state university, contingent on maintaining my grades through senior year. Catherine enrolled in community college courses to become a financial counselor. She attended classes in the evenings while working during the day, determined to turn our family's tragedy into a career helping others. Her children stayed with us on class nights, integrating seamlessly into our new household routines. The criminal trial date was set for 3 months out. The prosecutor met with each of us individually to prepare our testimony. She emphasized the importance of staying factual and avoiding emotional outbursts, no matter how my father's defense attorney might try to provoke us. My grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks before the trial. Her final act of protection was ensuring the family trust was ironclad, preventing my father from accessing any inheritance. The funeral became a reunion for family members who'd been divided by my father's manipulations. During the estate settlement, we discovered my grandmother had been documenting family finances for decades. Her records revealed patterns of financial control extending back to my father's childhood. She'd left a letter explaining how she'd tried to intervene, but been shut out by my grandfather's similar behaviors. The trial began on a cold Monday morning. My father appeared in court looking haggard, his gambling addiction having aged him dramatically. He avoided eye contact with any of us, as the prosecutor laid out the charges in her opening statement. My testimony lasted 3 hours. The prosecutor walked me through discovering the gambling addiction, organizing the financial literacy club, and finding the evidence of theft. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a rebellious teenager angry about reasonable parental discipline, but the evidence spoke louder than his insinuations. My sister testified via closed-circuit television due to her age. Her matter-of-fact recitation of garage nights, complete with medical records showing the correlation between punishments and hospital visits, left several jury members visibly shaken. The defense attorney declined to cross-examine her. Marcus testified about the preferential treatment he'd received and the guilt it caused him. He described our father teaching him to falsify financial documents, providing examples of the doctored spreadsheets. His testimony established a pattern of deliberate deception rather than misguided parenting. The medical experts testified about the long-term damage caused by repeated cold exposure. They showed chest x-rays revealing scarring patterns consistent with hypothermic injury. The correlation between garage punishments and respiratory damage was undeniable. Catherine testified about finding her daughter blue-lipped and barely responsive after a garage night. She broke down describing the ambulance ride and her daughter's week in intensive care. The defense attorney's attempts to minimize the severity fell flat against the medical documentation. My mother testified last, detailing years of financial control and deception. She produced bank records showing how my father had systematically drained accounts while maintaining the appearance of fiscal responsibility. Her quiet dignity throughout the questioning impressed the jury. The defense's case relied primarily on character witnesses who knew my father professionally. They described him as a dedicated family man and financial advisor, unaware of his double life. Their testimony crumbled under cross-examination when confronted with evidence of his gambling addiction. My father took a stand in his own defense, claiming the garage punishments were meant to teach financial discipline. He insisted the medical issues were coincidental, not caused by cold exposure. His testimony unraveled when the prosecutor presented his own journal entries celebrating successful intimidation tactics. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts: identity theft, financial fraud, child endangerment, and criminal neglect. My father stood motionless as the verdicts were read, finally facing consequences for his actions. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. The judge ordered a pre-sentencing investigation investigation to determine appropriate punishment. We submitted victim impact statements detailing how his actions had affected our lives, health, and futures. The divorce was finalized the week before sentencing. My mother received the house and primary custody of minor children. My father got his gambling debts and a portion of his retirement account. The settlement included provisions for him to pay restitution for the stolen college funds. At sentencing, the judge condemned my father's systematic abuse of power and trust. She sentenced him to 5 years in prison with possibility of parole after 3. He was ordered to pay full restitution and undergo mandatory gambling addiction treatment upon release. My father was led away in handcuffs without looking back at his family. We sat in the courtroom afterward, processing the finality of justice served. My mother held my sister's hand while Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. The walk out of the courthouse felt different than when we'd entered. The weight of anticipation had lifted, replaced by a mixture of relief and sadness. We'd gotten justice, but at the cost of our family as we'd known it. Back home, we began the slow process of building new traditions. Family meetings became opportunities for open communication rather than financial interrogations. We established reasonable budgets together with input from everyone old enough to participate. My sister's health improved steadily with consistent treatment and a stress-free environment. She joined the school choir, finding that singing helped strengthen her lungs. Her confidence grew as she discovered abilities beyond mere survival. Marcus changed his major to social work, inspired by the advocates who'd helped us navigate the system. He volunteered at a local shelter, sharing his story with other young people trapped in abusive situations. His transformation from enabler to advocate was complete. I continued running the Financial Literacy Club, now with official school sponsorship. We expanded beyond my family to help other students understand budgeting, credit, and recognizing financial abuse. The club became my legacy, something positive born from trauma. Catherine graduated with her financial counseling certificate and immediately found work at a domestic violence shelter. She specialized in helping families untangle financial abuse, using our family's experience to guide others toward freedom. Her daughter, Kathy, despite ongoing health challenges, thrived in the supportive environment. My mother discovered a talent for small business management. She started a bookkeeping service for local businesses, building a client base through word of mouth. Her newfound financial independence was both practical and symbolic. The younger cousins in our family grew up without fear of punishment for normal childhood mistakes. They learned about money through age-appropriate lessons and positive reinforcement. The cycle of abuse had been broken. We maintained the family trust my grandmother had established, using it to ensure education and medical needs were met. The monthly trust meetings became opportunities to celebrate achievements and plan for the future. Her final gift continued protecting us. As I prepared for college, I reflected on how much had changed. The house that had once been a prison of fear and control had become a haven of support and growth. The garage, former site of punishment, now housed my mother's business supplies and our bicycles. My acceptance letter arrived on a spring afternoon. The full scholarship would cover everything, allowing me to pursue my economics degree without debt. I'd turned my survival skills into academic achievement, transforming trauma into opportunity. The extended family gradually healed from the divisions my father had created. Holiday gatherings resumed, with new traditions replacing the old tensions. We'd learned to recognize manipulation and control, making our bonds stronger through shared vigilance. My economics teacher asked me to speak at the senior awards ceremony about overcoming adversity. I accepted, knowing my story might help others recognize abuse in their own homes. The speech focused on resilience and the power of knowledge to change circumstances. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of pride and poignancy. My father's absence was notable but not mourned. The family members who'd stood by us filled the auditorium, cheering as I walked across the stage. My sister's improved breathing allowed her to whistle loudly when my name was called. That evening, we held a celebration at home. The same kitchen where I'd once been interrogated about hidden money now hosted a joyful gathering. My mother had prepared a feast without worrying about every penny spent. The transformation was complete. As I packed for college that summer, I found old receipts hidden in my desk drawer, remnants of the elaborate deceptions we'd maintained for survival. I threw them away, no longer needing to hide or lie about money. Financial freedom meant more than just having enough. It meant living without fear. My sister helped me pack, her breathing easy and unlabored. She decorated a photo album with pictures of our family's journey toward healing. The final page showed all of us at my graduation, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. We'd survived, we'd healed, and we'd built something better from the ruins of what we'd lost. The image of them throwing away those old receipts really gets to me because it shows they're finally free from that terrible control. Thanks for reading this powerful story with me. See you all in the next.